Once upon a time in City O, there lived a lady called Lisa. She had always been beautiful, and everyone in the city knew it. Her skin glowed like honey in the sun, her eyes sparkled with mischief, and her smile could make anyone forget their worries. But beauty wasn't enough for Lisa. She wanted more. She wanted wealth, power, and fame, things she believed her beauty alone could never bring her. The city was small, and everyone knew everyone's business. Lisa had seen how the rich lived, and she envied them. She wanted their fancy clothes, their big houses, and their luxurious lives. She didn't care about hard work or waiting patiently for good things to come. She wanted it all, and she wanted it now. One afternoon, while in the mall, she overheard a conversation that would change everything. A group of women were gossiping about a man who was different from all the others in the city. His name was Daniel, and he was said to be a billionaire. He lived in a mansion far away from everyone else, and no one knew much about him. But there was one thing everyone agreed on: Daniel had everything. He had money, power, and a charm that made people do whatever he asked. "He can give anyone anything they want," one of the women whispered. "But there's a price. You must agree to marry him and have his child. That's the only way to get what you dream of." Lisa's heart raced. Marrying a billionaire? Having his child? It sounded too good to be true. She didn't care about the price. In her mind, it was a small price to pay for the life she had always wanted. The next day, she found herself standing at the gates of Daniel's mansion. She had never been so nervous, but the thought of wealth and power pushed her forward. She rang the bell, and after a moment, the large door opened. Daniel stood in the doorway. He was tall and handsome, his smile warm and welcoming. But there was something in his eyes, something that made Lisa feel both intrigued and uneasy. "Ah, Lisa," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "I've been waiting for you. Come in, come in." She stepped inside, trying to hide her excitement. Daniel led her into a room filled with expensive furniture and rich decorations. Everything in the room screamed wealth. Lisa's eyes couldn't stop taking it all in. They spoke and spoke. Both parties were happy. "Tell me," Daniel said, "what is it that you want most in life?" Lisa's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for. "I want wealth," she said, almost breathlessly. "I want power. I want a life of luxury. I want to be some people's envy." Daniel nodded slowly. "And what would you do to get it?" "I would do anything," Lisa replied, her voice firm, filled with determination. A strange smile played on Daniel's lips. "Anything, you say?" "Yes, anything," Lisa repeated, her voice unwavering. Daniel walked closer to her, his eyes studying her carefully. "Very well. I can give you everything you want. But there is one condition." Lisa's excitement grew. "What is it?" "You must marry me," Daniel said, his voice low. "And you must bear my child. That is the price for the wealth you seek." Lisa was stunned for a moment. Marrying him? Having his child? It seemed like such a strange request, but the promise of everything she had ever wanted was too much to resist. She didn't think twice. "I agree," she said, her voice full of certainty. "I'll marry you. I'll have your child. Give me everything." Daniel smiled, his eyes gleaming with a mysterious light. "You've made a wise choice, Lisa. You will not regret it." The days after, Lisa's agreement with Daniel were blur. Every part of her life changed. She moved into Daniel's mansion, a place filled with luxury beyond anything she could have ever imagined. The mansion, though beautiful, always felt too quiet. The walls seemed to whisper secrets, and the heavy curtains hid the sun's warmth, casting everything in a peaceful shade. Yet, Lisa couldn't bring herself to care. She was finally living the life she had always dreamed of. In the mansion, they lived as husband and wife, indulging in all activities of a couple. Daniel was a strange man, always distant but incredibly charming when he spoke to her. He told her that they would marry soon, and in the meantime, he treated her like royalty. She had everything she wanted: beautiful clothes, jewelry, and food that tasted like it came from the gods. The only thing missing was the one thing Daniel had promised: the child. It was only after a few weeks that Lisa began to feel something strange happening to her body. It was subtle at first, just a feeling of nausea now and then, and an unusual tiredness that never seemed to go away. It felt as though she was pregnant. But as time passed, her stomach grew round, and her body changed. Lisa felt the baby moving inside her, and it filled her with excitement. She was finally going to give Daniel what he wanted, and what she needed to keep her life of luxury. Yet, a part of her, buried deep inside, was unsettled. There were moments when she would catch Daniel staring at her, not with affection, but with something else, something darker. He would smile, but his eyes seemed cold, as though he was watching her not out of love, but because he was waiting for something. One evening, while Lisa was resting in her room, Daniel approached her with a strange look in his eyes. He was carrying a small wooden box, its surface filled with strange symbols. "Open it," he said softly, his voice almost hypnotic. Lisa took the box from his hands, her fingers trembling as she removed the lid. Inside, there was a beautiful golden pendant shaped like a snake. The pendant shone in the dim light of the room, and for a brief moment, Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. "This is for you," Daniel said, his voice smooth. "It will protect you and the child. Wear it always." Lisa hesitated, but the thought of the child and everything she stood to gain made her nod. She put the pendant around her neck without question, feeling its weight settle against her skin. As the days passed, Lisa continued to grow, her pregnancy becoming more obvious. But there was something wrong. The baby inside her didn't feel like a baby. At times, she could feel it moving, but it wasn't the typical feeling of a child kicking. These movements were sharp, almost violent, like something that wanted to escape. There were nights when she woke up to the sound of soft hissing from deep inside her body. She brushed it off, telling herself it was just the pregnancy playing tricks on her mind. Daniel, however, seemed to be watching her closely, his expression always unreadable. He had a strange intensity about him, like he knew something she didn't. One night, Lisa could no longer ignore the discomfort in her body. The hissing grew louder, and it was accompanied by a feeling she couldn't explain, a crawling sensation, as if something was slithering inside her, trying to break free. Terrified, she ran to Daniel's study, her heart pounding. She found him sitting in front of a large wooden desk, surrounded by books and papers. "Daniel," she gasped, "something is wrong. The baby. I feel it moving, in ways that it shouldn't." Daniel didn't look up immediately. He was calm, almost too calm. Then, after a long pause, he spoke. "You've made a deal, Lisa. And now you must fulfill it." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean? What's happening to me?" Daniel slowly stood up, his expression darkening. "You were never meant to carry a normal child. The wealth, the power, it all comes with a price. You agreed to marry me, to have my child, but the child you carry is not human. It's something else." Lisa's eyes widened in shock. "What are you talking about?" Daniel stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You didn't think it was just about wealth, did you? This child is the key to my power. And soon, it will be born." Lisa's mind raced, her thoughts spinning. The pendant around her neck suddenly felt heavy, almost suffocating. She tried to rip it off, but it was stuck, binding her, just like Daniel's words. "You said you would do anything for wealth," Daniel continued, his tone cold. "And now you have everything. But the cost is far more than you imagined. The child you carry is not a baby. It's a snake. Lisa staggered back, her eyes wide with disbelief. A snake? No. You can't be serious. Daniel smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile filled with darkness, a smile that sent a chill through her bones. It's true, he said softly. I have been searching for this power for years. A snake born of a woman will make me invincible. It will give me wealth beyond measure, power that no one can take from me. And you, Lisa, will be the one to bear it. Lisa fell to her knees, her breath coming in short gasps. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything he was saying. She had been so focused on the idea of wealth, on the promise of a life of luxury, that she hadn't thought about the consequences. She had been blinded by greed, and now it was too late to turn back. Why? She whispered, her voice trembling. Why me? Because you were foolish enough to want everything, Daniel said. And now you will give me everything. With that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Lisa alone with the terrifying truth. Lisa barely slept that night. Her mind was consumed by what Daniel had told her, but the terror she felt was nothing compared to the horror she would experience in the coming days. As the days passed, her pregnancy grew even more uncomfortable. The movements inside her became stronger, almost violent, as though the child she carried was no longer a child at all. She tried to keep herself together, to stay focused on the life of luxury she had been promised. But every time she looked into a mirror, she saw something different. Her eyes, once filled with excitement and dreams of wealth, were now shadowed with fear. She felt like a stranger in her own body, as though she was no longer in control of what was happening to her. Lisa spent most of her time locked in her room, staring at the golden pendant Daniel had given her, the snake pendant that now seemed to mock her. Every time she touched it, she felt a strange energy pulse through her. It was as if the pendant was alive, feeding off her fear, growing stronger with every passing day. One evening, as Lisa lay in bed, she felt a sharp pain deep inside her. It was unlike anything she had ever felt before. It was as though something was pushing its way out of her, something that didn't belong. She gasped, clutching her stomach, but the pain only grew stronger. A cold sweat broke out on her forehead as she struggled to breathe. The hissing inside her was louder now, more distinct. It was coming from within her body, as if the snake Daniel had spoken of was trying to break free. In a panic, she rushed to the door, trying to call out for help, but the mansion was silent. The servants had long since disappeared, and Daniel was nowhere to be found. Lisa stumbled down the long, empty hallway, her body trembling with each step. She made her way to Daniel's study, desperate for answers, desperate to understand what was happening to her. When she burst into the study, Daniel was sitting at his desk, his back turned to her. He didn't even look up as she entered. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from a small candle on the desk. Lisa's mind was spinning. She could feel the child inside her, not a baby, but a creature of darkness. The hissing was deafening now, and the pain was unbearable. She felt as though her body was being torn apart, as though something was trying to break free from within her. Suddenly, Daniel stood up and walked toward the desk, where he pulled open a drawer and retrieved a small, silver knife. Lisa's heart skipped a beat as she watched him approach her with it. "Don't worry, Lisa," he said in a low, calm voice. "You'll soon see that all of this was worth it. You will give me the power I need." Lisa felt a surge of panic, her body shaking violently. She tried to crawl backward, but her limbs wouldn't obey her. She could feel the creature inside her moving faster, more urgently, as if it knew its time had come. "No. Please," she gasped, but Daniel was already standing over her, the knife gleaming in his hand. But just as he reached down to touch her, the room seemed to shift. The air grew thick with tension, and a strange energy filled the room. Lisa's vision blurred, and she felt herself drifting in and out of consciousness. The pain in her body intensified, and then, with one final scream, she felt something break free. Lisa's heart raced as the pain inside her grew unbearable. She could feel it now. Whatever was inside her was no longer just a baby, but something else. She could hear the hissing clearly now, and it was louder than ever, echoing in her ears like a deathly song. Her vision blurred as waves of dizziness washed over her, and the world around her seemed to collapse. She looked at Daniel, who stood at the edge of the room, his expression cold and calculating. The silver knife still gleamed in his hand, but he made no move to approach her. Instead, he watched her with an almost satisfied look on his face, as though waiting for the inevitable. Waiting for her to deliver the serpent that would give him the power he had so desperately sought. In the moment of her panic, something deep within her snapped. She realized the truth. She wasn't just a pawn in Daniel's scheme, she was the key to his ascension. She had been used, manipulated, and discarded in a game she had never fully understood. And now, her body was the vessel of his dark ambition. Desperate and terrified, Lisa reached out with trembling hands, trying to push herself up. But the pain inside her was too much, and she collapsed back onto the cold floor. The hissing inside her grew louder, almost deafening, as though something was trying to claw its way out of her very skin. "Please, Daniel," she gasped, her voice hoarse and barely a whisper. "Please, let me go. This isn't worth it." But Daniel only watched her, his eyes glowing with cold satisfaction. "You should have known, Lisa. There's no way out now." Lisa's breath came in sharp gasps as the pain intensified. She could feel her body contracting as the creature inside her struggled to escape. She pressed her hands to her stomach, but it was futile. She knew that what was happening was far beyond her control. Suddenly, the pain exploded in a wave of unimaginable intensity. It felt like her entire body was being torn apart, and she screamed out in agony. She could feel something moving inside her, slithering, twisting, and pushing against her skin. She gasped for breath, her vision fading in and out, but the pressure inside her only grew. And then, with a final, horrifying sound, a loud, wet, slithering noise, the creature inside her was free. Lisa's scream echoed through the room as a massive, twisting serpent emerged from her body. Its scales shone in the dim light, and its eyes were black as night, filled with an unnatural hunger. The snake hissed violently, its long body coiling around Lisa's limp form. Daniel stepped forward, his face a twisted mixture of triumph and satisfaction. He watched as the snake uncoiled from Lisa's body, its movements smooth and deliberate, as though it had been born for this moment. It hissed again, its tongue flicking out, tasting the air. The room was thick with the stench of blood. Lisa lay on the floor, exhausted and broken, her body trembling. She looked up at Daniel, her eyes wide with disbelief and horror. The reality of what had just happened hit her like a wave. She had given birth to a snake, no, not just any snake, but one that would serve Daniel's dark purpose. You did this to me," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage and disbelief. "You used me. You lied to me." Daniel only nodded, his eyes cold and unmoving. "You were never meant to be anything more than a vessel, Lisa. A way to bring about the power I need. This snake, it will help me take everything I want. The wealth, the fame, the control over everything." Lisa's body was shaking, but not from the cold. She was filled with a rage so deep, it burned inside her like fire. She had been a fool, blinded by her desire for wealth, and now she was nothing but a pawn in Daniel's twisted game. The creature that had emerged from her womb was no longer a baby. It was a tool, a weapon in the hands of a man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. But as Lisa lay there, broken and weak, something within her stirred. She had been used, yes, but she was not powerless. The snake, the creature that had been born of her body, was not Daniel's to control. It had come from her, and in some way, it was hers. The thought gave her a flicker of hope, a brief moment of clarity. "I won't let you use me," Lisa said through gritted teeth, struggling to rise to her feet. The pain from her childbirth still coursed through her, but she pushed through it, her anger fueling her. She locked eyes with Daniel, her voice filled with newfound strength. "I won't be your pawn." Daniel's eyes narrowed as he stepped toward her, but the snake, which had been coiled on the floor, suddenly hissed loudly and raised its head, its eyes fixed on him. Lisa watched in disbelief as the snake, the very creature she had birthed, seemed to move of its own accord, as if it had a mind of its own. What is this?" Daniel muttered under his breath, taking a step back. The snake moved quickly, its long body moving across the floor and striking at Daniel, who barely managed to avoid it. He stumbled back in shock, his face twisting in confusion and fear. Lisa took a step forward, her heart pounding, but she knew this was her moment. "You can't control it, Daniel," she said, her voice steady now. "This is my child, and I will not let you use it for your evil plans." Daniel stood frozen, staring at the snake that now seemed to protect Lisa, its body poised and ready to strike again. For the first time, the cold, calculating man looked unsure. The snake was no longer a tool he could command, it had turned against him. Lisa's hands trembled as she reached down to the snake, her fingers brushing its scales. The creature seemed to recognize her touch, calming slightly under her hand. It was as if she had finally gained control, a control that Daniel had never accounted for. "You've made a mistake," she said, her voice calm but firm. "And now, you'll pay for it." The snake hissed one last time before it lunged forward, striking Daniel. He screamed as the fangs sank into his leg, but it was too late. The poison spread quickly, and within moments, Daniel collapsed to the floor, convulsing. His body twisted in agony as the venom from the snake's bite took hold. Lisa stood over him, her eyes cold as she watched him die. She had been used, manipulated, and betrayed, but now it was over. Daniel's reign of greed and cruelty had come to an end, and with it, the curse he had placed on her. As the last breath left Daniel's body, Lisa stood tall, no longer a pawn, but a woman who had reclaimed her power. The snake that had once been a symbol of her suffering was now her ally, a creature that had freed her from Daniel's control. Lisa looked at the creature one last time, her heart filled with both fear and gratitude. It had brought her through the darkness, and now it was time to leave the mansion behind. The wealth, the power, and the fame were no longer important. She had something far more valuable now: freedom. However, when Lisa turned to leave the room, the snake moved behind her, a silent protector, and together, they disappeared into the night.